Welcome to How I Built My Fundraising Consultancy, the stories behind the people driving results in the nonprofit sector.
Fundraisers increasingly have to become marketers. Marketers increasingly have to become fundraisers. I feel that the two departments can no longer be siloed. They never should have been siloed, but increasingly they can.
Joining us today on the podcast is Axelrad, principal at Clairification. You may know her by the name of Clairification Claire. She comes from a background of almost 30 years in the nonprofit fundraising world before starting up her business in 2009. We discuss a variety of topics, including her shift in focus from consulting to education, how her business has changed over the years, where the name Clairification came from, and much more. Without further delay, here's my interview with Claire.
I'm here today with Claire Axelrad. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you.
So the first thing I want to ask you is, where'd the name come from, Clairification Claire? How'd you come up with that?
Well, it's obvious, isn't it? All throughout my career, I think I've always been really interested in clarifying things. So if somebody comes to me and says, I want a brochure, make me a brochure, I'll be like, okay, let's clarify. Why do you want that brochure? What's it going to help you accomplish to make sure that we're getting at the right question?
Yeah, absolutely. You started your business with that name in place, or was that changed over the years?
Oh, no. I started with that in place.
Okay, great. And I was looking into kind of your history. You had almost 30 years of experience in different nonprofits and fundraising positions over the years. What were some of your biggest lessons over those years?
I think in the beginning, what was most important to me was that I attended the fundraising school that was founded by Hank Rosso, and it's now part of the University of Indiana School of Philanthropy. And I discovered there is a right way and a wrong way to do things. There is an existing body of fundamental fundraising, nonprofit marketing knowledge that is increasingly research-backed, and it works. And so I thought, this is something that I can do as a career. I made a transition from law into fundraising. I discovered this is not some fly-by-night stuff. It's not just like putting on a party. It's not door-to-door sales. It's really a discipline. So I discovered that, and then I applied that. And what I learned over the years is the best way to learn is to find other people who are doing it well, reach out to them, learn from them, borrow from them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then one of my big aha moments was when I realized that donors are people too. And even working with very wealthy donors, you don't need to be intimidated by them. They're just people. If you become their friend, they'll become your friend. And the same really holds true for the staff and the volunteers that you work with. We're all just people. We're all in this together. We're all after the same vision. And I guess when I say we're all after the same vision, that would be another piece of advice, which probably people have heard before, is that you want to work for a cause about which you're passionate. When you are talking about your cause and your mission and your vision, if you're passionate about it, people can tell. Passion is contagious. And this is what I tell people for major donor fundraising as well. How you communicate matters more than what you communicate. So those would be some, I guess, of the takeaways. Over 30 years, I have a lot of takeaways, but
yeah,
those come top of mind.
What did inspire you to start your own business?
Was it actually a life transition for me? My husband passed away suddenly, and I was working 14-hour days, sort of pouring myself into the work. And I suddenly realized, I need to take a moment and decide what I'm doing the rest of my life. I had always been a teacher. People had been telling me for years that I should go out on my own and consult. I actually fully intended to go back into a full-time job. But while I was considering, people started asking me to do projects for them. So I started doing that. And then the biggest reason that I ended up doing what I'm doing now is I always like to share stuff. I guess it's part of that clarification thing, where I would read an interesting article, and even before there was an internet and we could communicate digitally, I would copy articles, I would highlight them, I would write in the margins, And I would ask other people, what do you think? What do you think we could do that's addressing what this article is talking about? And I realized that now that I was away from the trenches and I had some time to kind of read online and see everything that was going on in the sector, that because of the digital revolution, nonprofit marketing and fundraising has changed so much. I would say more in the past maybe 5 to 7 years than in the preceding 50. And I felt like a lot of nonprofits weren't getting it. They weren't adapting very well. And so I started to write about it, to share, to blog. And I found out that I really, really loved doing that. I was getting a lot of traction. People were reading what I was writing. And I thought, I like this. This is really great. This is what I want to do.
You mentioned teaching, and that's a huge component of your business. How does your approach change with the different mediums you work in?
I don't know if my approach is really all that different, because digital these days is pretty awesome. You can have interactive sessions, you can do Q&A, you can even do Skype and see people. I mean, I've done sessions where we've actually done major gift training where people would actually get to practice doing a major donor ask, and I could see them and I could correct them in real time. The only difference usually, I think, in person is that you can do something that's a little bit more intense, more in-depth, lengthier. I don't know if that's even a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, the in-person is really limiting in the sense that there's fewer people that can participate. Organizations tend to have to be larger because they send people, there are expenses involved, or else you have to stay very local. I don't think it's actually all that different.
Yeah. Now, something I hear a lot from teachers is that they learn from their students. Have you taken any lessons away from the people that you teach ever?
I think what I learn is what the challenges are in the trenches. And I mean, I think really that is one of the things that distinguishes me from many consultants out there, is that I actually worked in the trenches for 30 years. I'm quite familiar with what people's challenges are. What I learn now is new challenges that have come up really because there's so much online fundraising and marketing now. Fundraisers increasingly have to become marketers. Marketers increasingly have to become fundraisers. I feel that the two departments can no longer be siloed. They never should have been siloed, but increasingly they can. One of my favorite books is To Sell is Human by Daniel Pink, and he makes the point that we're all in sales now. I'm increasingly finding that that is true for nonprofits. I'm trying to help them get to that place and influence their leaders so that they can kind of get to that point where there really is a culture of philanthropy, which is the memes of the day. Everybody's talking about getting a culture of philanthropy, but few people really understand what that means, what that is. I kind of learn from my students where their real challenges lie, and then I come back to my practice and my blog, and I start talking about those things that are increasingly important and challenging to people.
Yeah. And you were mentioning marketing and fundraisers. It seems like you'd have some very confused donors if you have two different messages going out with different motives behind it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's really always been the case. I mean, my very, very first job in fundraising was at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music. And I discovered right then the fundraising department was going out to the community with a completely different message than the marketing department. We were going to donors and saying, you want to create the professional musicians of tomorrow. These were people who were interested in the opera and the symphony and the ballet, and they wanted all these professional musicians to be there. And we were asking them to pay for the equivalent of a student tuition, major donors. And then the marketing department was going out saying, we offer more free concerts than anybody else in the city. So it's a completely different market, like people who don't want to pay anything, and they weren't very well aligned.
Yeah. Now, your business has a huge education component. Has it always been that way?
I think it has always been that way, yes. It's one of the things that I like to do. I just really feel like if I know something, I want you to know it too. Life is too short. And I was lucky to have some really good teachers and mentors early on that I learned from. And I learned how to do things the right way. I just feel like I want to pay that forward or pay it back, or whichever I'm doing, both probably. So I would say yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I noticed on your website you have an e-course, Winning Major Gift Fundraising Strategies. How much of a time investment was it creating that, and how do you kind of evaluate, is this worth my time creating this resource or that property to have on your site?
Well, it took a long time, but I can't tell you exactly how much. It was an evolution. Like, I didn't just sit down and go, oh, I'm going to create a major gift course. I started writing a lot about major gifts. Then I created some e-guides about different aspects of major gifts. Then I did a few webinars on major gifts. And then I thought, hey, I could put this all together and create a big course. So at this point, it's a lot of material. It's 8 curriculum guides. Each is 20 to 50 pages, including about 5 different webinars and templates and scripts. So it's a lot of material, but I didn't just sit down and go, oh, well, this is going to take me 30 hours or 100 hours or 6 months. I couldn't even tell you. But it's really evolved, and it's just got everything in there that I have ever learned about how to put in place and really rock a major gift program, I think.
How do you find that balance between the free resources and the paid resources? You have a membership program. What's the balance of that?
I don't think I've found the balance. I offer a lot of free material, but a couple of years ago, I realized that I was working so hard, so many hours, and the amount of money that I was making for how much I was working was really ridiculous. And the more that I was getting demand for my services, the more it was costing me, because you have to buy, email providers. And if you get up above a certain number of subscribers, it costs you more money and have to invest in new technology. And I was like, okay, look, I want to pay it forward and all, but I don't want it to cost me money. That's when I went to a Clairification school model where you pay $100 a year. A tuition, it's very modest. It's pennies a day, but it makes it so that I can feel like I can justify doing what I really want to do and helping people, making a little bit of money, certainly not as much as I made when I worked in the trenches, but enough to feel like, okay, it's worth staying up till 10 o'clock at night and getting this done. Why am I doing this instead of reading a good book?
Right,
or
yeah.
going to the museum or whatever.
Yeah. Now, you've really developed your name, and I'm curious, what social network have you found to be the most valuable for you in kind of getting your message out to potential customers and people interested in your content?
When I started out, it was LinkedIn, and I participated in a lot of discussions. And I think a lot of people got to know me that way. Since then, it's evolved, and I would say most people are finding me on Twitter, and I share all of my blog posts on Twitter. So I would say those two are the biggest. Oh, and I would say I don't use Facebook. So I know I should be using Facebook, but have some personal feelings about Facebook. So I just don't do that. I'm sure I would get out there a lot more if I did. But
yeah, and it really is beneficial to master a couple that you feel you're great at.
Right.
So with your schedule, do you have time to do the traditional consulting work of having a client that you either visit in person or work with virtually?
I have been evolving towards doing just coaching. I still have a few projects. I used to do a lot of development audit, and I found that those are a lot of work. They're a huge investment, both for me and for the client. And then in many cases, I would find that the client would then take what I gave them and put it in a drawer. So they felt like, okay, we did that. We had an audit. Now we're good to go. And then they didn't really implement. And so then I started feeling like, okay, I'm not going to do this unless we include coaching as part of the package. But then it becomes quite expensive for people. What I really like is holding people's feet to the fire a little bit. So we have an hour coaching session. We get to the heart of the problem. We decide on some strategies that need to be implemented, and then they know they're going to talk to me next week at the same time. So they better do those things, because otherwise it's going to be embarrassing to talk to me and say, oh, well, we didn't really do anything yet. And I find that actually works the best to move people forward.
You mentioned staying up till 10 o'clock at night some nights. Do you hire out any work to a virtual assistant, or do you get help outside of just your own hours that you can put in?
I got to tell you, it's just me here. And that's one of the reasons that I really encourage people to sign up for Clairification School, because I say, look, I'm not a big company here. I'm not a large corporation. I'm not writing articles as loss leaders for expensive software that you can purchase. It's really just me. I'm trying to be helpful, but I'm also trying to make a modest living here. I have tried virtual assistants. I've found that in my particular case, it took me almost as much time to explain to them what I wanted them to do, and then often to check their work.
Yeah.
So my main assistant right now is my technology guru, who happens to be my husband, and that's what Clairification is.
Yeah. What's your typical schedule like week to week?
I publish my own articles twice a week. I also contribute articles to quite a number of other places. So I'm writing a lot of articles, I'm writing a lot of e-guides, doing some coaching. I pretty much use a traditional calendar and calendar in what I'm going to work on during the day and schedule a block of time that I'm going to work on that during the day to make sure that I have time to do that. I also do a lot of webinars, a lot of free webinars. Somehow I just keep plodding away, working.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd change starting over, going back 7 years with the knowledge you have today? Anything you'd change from the start?
I don't know, really. I would say, it would be great if I had great clarity as to where I wanted to go. But I think that clarity evolves over time. You start, and then you determine what you really enjoy doing. If I was giving advice to people, figure out what you enjoy. Don't just keep trying to be all things to all people. I have a hugely ambitious competitive streak. So sometimes I will see, other person is offering podcasts or weekly radio sessions or Facebook live chats or Google Hangouts. I have to do that too. And every time I've tried to do something like that, it's been a mistake. You have to be you.
Yeah.
And be uniquely you. And do what you love doing, because then it's fun. You don't feel like you've got the weight of the world hanging on your shoulders.
Has writing always been something you've enjoyed doing?
I have always enjoyed writing, but I have to say it's been a bit of a revelation. I did write a lot in my career, but it was utilitarian. I wrote a lot of grant proposals. I wrote newsletter articles. I wrote annual appeals. Whatever needed to be written. But then I ended up hiring a lot of people because I had a large staff. I would hire somebody who that was their career. They were a writer. So I always felt like, well, they write better than me. But I found, I really do like this. I'm not so bad at it.
When we return, a quick lightning round. First, a quick break. This episode of How I Built My Fundraising Consultancy is brought to you by us here at MarketSmart and the Fundraising Report Card. Expand your fundraising consultancy toolkit by signing up for fundraisingreportcard.com. What is the Fundraising Report Card? Well, it's a free service offered at fundraisingreportcard.com that enhances your business with easy-to-use fundraising analytics and charts. Help your clients get proposals approved faster by using the beautiful and elegant charts created automatically in seconds by fundraisingreportcard.com. Best of all, you can use your logo in the reports and charts it generates. Learn more about the consultant version of Fundraising Report Card at www.fundraisingreportcard.com/consultants. Available as a free version or a paid version billed quarterly or annually. Once again, that's fundraisingreportcard.com/consultants. Now, back to how I built my fundraising consultancy.
Well, with that, let's get to the lightning round. It's just a series of quick questions and answers.
Okay.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Both and. So I had a boss who said, Claire, I'm going to tell you something that's going to change your life. Both and. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? It's going to change my life. But it's the idea of rather than saying yes, but you kind of say, yeah, both these things are true. And this is why maybe we need a little tweak on what you're suggesting here, or this is a little snag that might need to be overcome first. So you never want to get to that but, because nobody listens to anything after they hear that word but.
What book would you recommend to those getting started and why?
Well, I think I just told you To Sell is Human is one of my favorite books. It's really about applying everything in marketing and human nature. It's not too fundraising. I heard Daniel Pink speak, and as he was speaking, I was feeling like he could be saying to fundraise is human. It just really applies in a very logical, common sense way. So I really like that book.
What's your favorite personal productivity habit?
Calendaring, putting stuff in my calendar and saying, this is what I'm going to be spending the next 2 hours on.
What's the best under $100 purchase you've made in the last month or so?
I just got back from Paris and I bought a pair of vintage slacks for $15, and they're like really cool. They're kind of like rocker 60s pants. I love them.
Do you have a favorite monthly subscription or service you're signed up for?
Honestly, I think it's the New York Times. I just love to see what's going on in the world, and I think that that is one of the things that fundraisers really need to pay attention to, because you want to be resonant with what is top of mind for your supporters. Whatever it is that you're doing, try to tie that into problems that people are concerned about.
What's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
When I was in college, I won a scholarship and I went and traveled in Brazil to do thesis research, and I interviewed the deposed dictator of Portugal, Salazar.
Oh, wow. Very cool. As a writer, do you have a favorite word?
I don't know that this is a writing word, but I really like the word cupcake. Cupcake and pancake. I guess that's probably because there's cake in there, but those words, I think they're very cute.
They're fun words, for sure. There's a lot
Yes.
of whimsy in them.
Right.
Tea or coffee?
Tea. I drink about a pot of tea a day. I like coffee too, but tea.
And what do clients never ask you that you wish they did?
I think, what can I do for you? I like that question for everybody all the time. I mean, it's really a good question to ask your donors too, or to ask your colleagues on your staff. I mean, that's one of the things that the Haas Fund has done a lot of work on, culture of philanthropy, and their latest report, Bright Spot, highlighted about 10 or 11 organizations that they thought had really good cultures of philanthropy. And one of the things they found was, when you're walking in the halls and you see people, you don't just say, "Hi, how are you doing?" But you say, "Is there anything I can do for you today?" It's a really good way of being in the world. Do a lot of reading on gratitude as well. I talk a lot about cultivating an attitude of gratitude. And I think it's just a good way to interact with people.
What's the most common error you see nonprofits make?
I would say thinking small. You really need to think about your mission in terms of how can you make the greatest impact in the world, and what more can you do? We tend in the nonprofit sector to have a very much of a starvation mentality, that we think, oh, our overhead can't be more than 10% or 20%, and people don't spend enough money to make enough money. And they say, I just can't afford to do that. If I were to do that, I really should spend it on a social worker, not a fundraiser. And they don't see that if they spent it on a fundraiser, maybe they could hire 3 or 5 social workers. So think big.
What charities do you admire or support?
I admire the ACLU. I support the ACLU. I think they do a very effective job, and they also do a very effective job of fundraising and stewardship. So they stay connected with their donors, and they don't just talk to them about more money. The ACLU is really good about inviting you to town halls that are virtual, that you can just listen on your phone, sending stories of impact, giving you things to do, all that kind of good stuff, so that by the time they come and ask for another gift, you're very inclined to support them.
Yeah. And where can people find more information about your services?
They can go to my website, which is clairification.com. Clairification spelled like my name with an I. And they can find me on Twitter at Charity Clarity, also spelled CLAIRITY. And look me up on LinkedIn. But go to my website, find Clairification, and look at all of the different things that I have to offer, and look at enroll. I would love to have folks enroll as a student in Clairification School. If anybody wants to email me, they can email me directly at claire@clairification.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of How I Built My Fundraising Consultancy, presented by MarketSmart. If you like the show, make sure to review it in iTunes and pass it along to a colleague. If you are curious about what we do, check out imarketsmart.com and don't forget to download the ultimate guide to writing major donor letters by going to www.imarketsmart.com/major letters. Thanks for listening.